24/7. I'm Reed Cowan. So you see the fire on the mountain there, and you see the push of those flames by winds. Winds now expected to kick up again in severity in Southern California. Millions in Los Angeles are hoping progress over the weekend isn't erased due to that wind. We can tell you at this hour, 21 are confirmed dead, thousands of structures incinerated. Right now, there are 3 active wildfires. This map shows you where they are, the biggest being the Palisades fire. More than 23,000 acres burned, or about as half the size of Washington, D.C. Firefighters have that fire about 14% contained, but then the Eaton fire burned more than 14,000 acres. It is at 33% containment. The Hearst fire, 800 acres, and we understand that fire is almost fully contained. Now let's talk about the side effects. At this hour, electricity is out to tens of thousands. 92,000 people under evacuation orders at this hour, watching those water drops and watching the fire go up the hill. Well, after closing dozens of campuses last week, LA Unified reopened most schools and all offices today. In fact, officials said they are now searching for more than 24 people reported missing during those wildfires. Also, LA County Sheriff's Department announced they made 34 arrests over curfew violations, drone incidents, and more. California Governor Gavin Newsom also announcing he's deploying more than 1,000 National Guard service members to Los Angeles. This morning, city officials gave an update on their firefighting efforts. Listen.
Our primary focus still remains the safety and well-being of our residents. These fires have caused significant disruptions, but we are working tirelessly with our partners to protect lives, property, and secure critical infrastructure.
So we went into Friday thinking that firefighters may have a little bit of a break. They would have that crucial time to get those fire containment numbers up. They did that. But what are current conditions right now, and what are they looking at? Could we take a back step?
It looks as though we could potentially take a back step. And what I mean by that, of course, they're working on the containment and a lot of the fire is out. But we're talking about, little tiny sparks moving from community to community when it comes to those brush fires.
Right.
Brush fires potentially, but also the big concern for us is spot fires. You see wind gusts anywhere up to around 25 miles per hour, and suddenly spot fires could be a concern. We're forecasted to see winds anywhere up to around 70 miles per hour. That just exacerbates that situation. So let's take a look at what's happening for us all the way down into Southern California with red flag warnings in effect right now. Anywhere from Los Angeles all the way to the border of Mexico, we are dealing with some of the driest conditions we've seen in quite some time. Mix that with the strong winds that we're expecting too. That's a natural disaster waiting to happen, and we've seen it just this past week with the Eaton fire and of course the Palisades fire. So let's get a good look at our fire weather outlook right now. As we zoom into these communities, it's the Santa Clarita Mountains where we could see wind gusts up to around 70 miles per hour, and it's expected to get worse as we head into our forecast tomorrow. The red flag warning will expire as we head into our Wednesday forecast. But as we take a look at the rest of the conditions throughout all of this region, it's not only the winds we're concerned about, of course, it's the relative humidity dropping too. And of course, the air quality alerts that are widespread throughout all of the Los Angeles area. This has been very concerning for many community members close to the Eden fire and all the way over into the Palisades fire. Most of that smoke moves offshore, but it sweeps throughout the Los Angeles basin before it gets there. And we've seen wind gusts anywhere up to around 40 miles per hour this morning that are pretty consistent, anywhere from areas like Chatsworth all the way over into Oxnard. Now, Chatsworth over the weekend had a reported wind of 72 miles per hour. It was areas close to Altadena that had 100-mile-per-hour winds just last week as this wind event really started to become widespread. And we're seeing these winds stay strong as we head into our forecasted hours Tuesday morning all the way into the afternoon hours tomorrow. It'll be a very similar setup as we head into Wednesday. So it's important to note these numbers right here are no joke. Altadena now at a 67-mile-per-hour wind just within the past 24 hours. These are strong gusty conditions allowing for those spot fires to really spread, and that's the big concern as they're continuing to work on that containment widespread throughout these fires.
Wow, and structure to structure fire, brush fire to structure fires, it only just adds fuel.
Of course.
And then you add the wind. Thanks for watching that. It's something we all need to hear. Well, in addition to the spread of fire on wind, misinformation also spreading like wildfire online in this environment. Our CBS News confirmed team investigating that misinformation, and that includes questions about fire hydrants and allegations that they ran dry for several hours when crews battled the Palisades fire earlier this week. CBS News confirmed executive producer Melissa Matani drilled down on the allegations about the fire hydrants. Watch.
According to LA Fire Department Captain Eric Scott, fire hydrants ran dry in the early hours of Wednesday morning due to, quote, extreme demand, and not because officials refused to fill water tanks before the fires, as was rumoured online. So to better understand this, let's break down just how these fire hydrants work. When battling a fire, firefighters connect their hoses to a hydrant that looks like this, and that's to get the water necessary to put out the fires. Now, these fire hydrants, they don't store water themselves. They act as a vehicle to get the water from the city's supplies. It's very much like the faucet on your kitchen sink. The key is that there needs to be enough water in here to create pressure to push the water through the pipes into the hydrant and then out to those firefighters. So the Upper Palisades area has 3 nearby water tanks. They look like this, and they each hold 1 million gallons, which supports those hydrants. That may sound like a lot, but it's not, especially not to fight a fast-moving wildfire. There is also a reservoir nearby, and that can hold 117 million gallons, but that was empty at the time of the fires because of ongoing repairs. So overall, there was less water available to refill those tanks quickly, but it's unclear how much of a difference it would have made. Why? Well, let's go back to Tuesday. As those Palisade fires started to spread, the LA Department of Water and Power said that 4 times the normal demand was seen for 15 hours straight. Now, fire hoses, they release hundreds of gallons of water per minute. But that sustained release by multiple hoses over hours with no break, that can drain a 1 million-gallon tank quickly, the department said, especially when the thick smoke and hurricane-level wind that day prevented aircraft from flying overhead to drop retardant and water. So the firefighters, they were limited to these ground sources, which is not how they normally put out fires of that magnitude. It's normally a combination of ground and air sources. Now, the pressure, that is another factor. The LA Department of Water and Power explained that it couldn't refill these tanks fast enough to create the pressure needed to push this water down the main line and then up again to the hydrants. Now, remember, these Palisades, they sit at a higher elevation, so they need more pressure to push this water up the hill, and that drains the limited water supplies even faster. So, in other words, these firefighters were pulling so much water that the city couldn't push more water into the reserves to replenish what they drained quickly enough, and crucially, at the pressure that they needed. So CBS News Confirmed is following all of this, much more on the California fires. So follow us to see more of our fact checks at CBS News Confirmed.
That's right. One of my favorite Instagram sites to follow, CBS News Confirmed. This is a way that you can help out. We know that you are looking for ways to help out when you see the reports of such devastation. Here are some ways we are suggesting. Just go to redcross.org/CBS. You can donate that way, or you can just call the Red Cross directly, 1-800-RED-CROSS. If you want to do it even faster, text Red Cross to 90999. Red Cross to 90999. That triggers a $10 donation. We have some breaking political news for you. Moments ago, Florida Judge Eileen Cannon has officially paved the way for at least the partial release of Special Counsel Jack Smith's final report. This move comes after a bid to block that effort by Trump's co-defendants. Well, now the DOJ can release the portion of that report dealing with the 2020 election. Additionally, Cannon will hold a hearing on Friday to go over plans to present the classified doctrines section of the report to members of Congress. You know, Trump's attorneys say that this should not happen. They fought against it happening. But now, because of Judge Cannon's ruling, at least a part of that will be released. Our monitors take us now to the White House. Moments from now, President Joe Biden set to deliver his final remarks about foreign policy. And let's place this in time. It comes just 24 hours after the president held a phone call with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Just moments ago, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan had this to say about that phone call.
And we are now at a pivotal point in the negotiations for a hostage deal and ceasefire in Gaza. The president spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday and just got off the phone with the Emir of Qatar. He'll be speaking soon also with President Sisi of Egypt. We are close to a deal, and it can get done this week. I'm not making a promise or a prediction, but it is there for the taking, and we are going to work to make it happen.
A deal there for the taking. So Ramy Inocencio joins us live from Tel Aviv with the latest on these ceasefire negotiations. Ramy, you've got news about that possible deal that could make headlines. What can you tell us?
Reed, hi there. Yeah, good to see you. An Israeli official tells CBS News about the first possible outlines of that ceasefire hostage deal with Hamas. These are the clearest official reportable details we have gotten so far. First, about the hostages. In the first phase, this official tells us that Hamas will release 33 hostages who are deemed humanitarian causes. Now, this implies the elderly, the sick, the wounded, and I'll remind that last week Hamas resurfaced a list of 34 hostages that it said it could free, which then leaned to the elderly. Some Americans were on that list. In total, there are believed to be 7 American hostages among about 100 total. Next, about the IDF's future presence inside Gaza. That Israeli source tells CBS News that the military will not leave Gaza until all the hostages are returned, and that the military will also not leave the Philadelphia corridor. Now, this is the corridor that runs along the border of southern Gaza as well as northern Egypt, and that there will be a buffer zone between Israel as well as Gaza. Unclear, though, how deep this buffer zone would be. Israel and Hamas have reportedly haggled on that. And then, lastly, about the situation for Palestinian detainees in Israeli prisons. That official also told CBS News that, this is a quote here, not me, Palestinian terrorists with blood on their hands will to Judea and Samaria. That is a reference to the West Bank for most of us. The official did not say where they will go, but the implication is that Palestinian detainees would be freed in exchange for Israeli hostages. No detail on how many detainees, but it is expected that for every one Israeli hostage released, then a much higher number of Palestinian prisoners would be released, possibly hundreds, maybe even thousands. So that is what we're getting from that Israeli official, Reed. A reminder, though, this is from one Israeli official, and talks can still collapse at any time. We know that they have been, we can say that they have been here before, we've been here before, but at least palpably it feels that there's so much movement, so much action, words on the ground, people on the ground trying to push this past the finish line.
So, Ramy, we're looking at video of people saying bring them home there in some protests. Let's play this out. Say you're able to pop back onto CBS News 24/7 and say that deal has been reached. How soon after a deal is reached could we see hostages released?
Unknown, that is an open question. There have been local news reports here, not confirmable, by the way, by CBS News, but local news reports that say that it could happen immediately. That it also could happen perhaps a week after some kind of ceasefire deal is inked. What we have to clarify here, though, is that what I've just told you are the outlines of a final draft. Now, this is a step back because this doesn't mean that we're actually on the cusp of a deal actually happening. The final deal has to actually be approved, and then it has to go to the Knesset, Israel's parliament here. That then has to be approved. And then after that, it has to be pushed ahead and actually executed. Now, all this takes time, and the longer this takes time, the more of a chance that something could happen to derail what people have agreed on.
Ramy Inocencio, thank you so much. It's good to sort of understand the process that goes from the negotiations table and then into those approval processes. You be safe, my friend. Good to see you. Thank you for streaming with us. Meanwhile, we're talking about cabinet nominee confirmation hearings. President-elect Donald Trump would very much like to have his cabinet picks confirmed before Inauguration Day. Pete Hegseth, all eyes, commanding a lot of attention after many allegations against him. Will he survive those confirmation hearings? CBS News 24/7 back after the break. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. The individuals Donald Trump tasked with leading the nation's top posts will take the hot seat this week. You see them here behind me on this graphic. 13 Trump nominees officially kick off their nomination process by fielding questions on their backgrounds. Some of those picks having a tough go with senators and closed-door meetings. Well, now they will take those questions publicly. The man likely to face the most stern line of questioning, Trump's controversial pick to lead the Defense Department. We're talking about Pete Hegseth. So let's go live to CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland. All right, so Scott, Senator Elizabeth Warren released 72 questions that she plans to ask Mr. Hegseth tomorrow. Here are two, and I just want to read these to our viewers. Have you ever received any treatment for substance abuse or alcohol? That's the first one. And then she plans to ask, how many times have you been accused of sexually harassing or sexually assaulting another individual? So in the midst of these questions, what is the risk for Pete Hegseth where the votes are concerned in Congress?
No matter where the votes are, Reed, there is a bright spotlight on Pete Hegseth as he answers those questions. He has the nation's attention. There are these series of hearings this week, but he goes first. And it seems clear as the week begins here, Reed, that he is top of mind for senators because he is trying to become the nation's defense secretary, charged with overseeing millions of people, service members, contractors, and all that goes into protecting America. It's an enormous job. It's a remarkably complex bureaucracy. But until today, really, Democrats have kept their powder dry about Pete Hegseth. Republicans have expressed some concerns or equivocated a bit about their support for Hegseth. But now it's Democrats who have the time in the hearing to make their argument and pose their questions. Elizabeth Warren is forecasting where some of this is going. They're going to ask about his experience level. Is he experienced enough for this complex bureaucracy? But also about those accusations Hegseth has denied from the start about previous alcohol abuse and that sexual misconduct allegation from 2017 in California. He has denied all of those allegations.
So what else are you watching for as these confirmation hearings play out, Scott?
Now, I'd love for you to put that graphic back up showing the many people going for job interviews at the U.S. Senate this week. It's about a dozen. And that's very limited bandwidth and time for Democrats to mobilize and galvanize against any one of those faces you see. So much is happening at once. They're going to have to pick their spots. January 15th stands out to me, though. The top left and top right there. Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota trying to be the nation's Homeland Security Secretary with oversight, presumably, Reed, of the mass deportation plans of President-elect Trump. And then Pam Bondi. She has 2 days of hearings to become the nation's top law enforcement official, the U.S. Attorney General, at a moment when there are hundreds of pending January 6 cases, promises by Trump of pardons, and fears that Trump will use the Department of Justice to go after his political enemies. Pam Bondi may not have big opponents in the Senate, but they have big questions for her.
While we have you here, Scott, we just got this moments ago some breaking news. That order by Florida Judge Eileen Cannon saying that she'll allow the release of at least some of Special Counsel Jack Smith's report into the investigation into the 2020 election interference case. What more are you learning here, and what kind of vibrations are you getting there on Capitol Hill among lawmakers?
To be clear, this opens the door for America to be able to read everything that Jack Smith put in his final report, what he found in his investigation of 2020 election interference. Judge Cannon's ruling still keeps restricted Jack Smith's findings about the classified records case involving Trump, because Trump has former co-defendants still going through the criminal system, and Judge Cannon wants to hold it back to protect that case. This could be released as early as midnight Eastern time, but the vibes we're getting is that the Trump team or those other defendants in Florida could try to make another appeal of what Judge Cannon just did, further sliding the time frame back from midnight to a date and time uncertain.
Not many days ago, the president-elect called Judge Cannon brilliant. It'll be fascinating to watch Truth Social and see what he has to say about her now. He did not want this development. Scott McFarland, always great to talk to you. Have a good day. We're also watching for fireworks in former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard's confirmation hearing. She's Trump's pick, of course, you'll remember, for Director of National Intelligence. So let's bring in CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes. Nancy, I want to ask you about something Senator John Barrasso said on Face the Nation. You have information on what he calls a paperwork problem holding up Gabbard's confirmation hearing. What is this all about?
Right, that was the first we had heard of it. He said that there was a paperwork problem with the Office of Government Ethics, which meant that she probably could not have a hearing this week. So that pushes her hearing to next week at the earliest. And what it means in practical terms is that President Trump is unlikely to have a director of national intelligence sworn in on January 20th, the same day that he is sworn in, which is something that presidents typically like to have because it is such a key position. In Tulsi Gabbard's case in particular, Reed, there are Democrats who have a number of concerns about her. Democrats on the Intelligence Committee, which will be holding her confirmation hearing. They say that she has relatively little intelligence experience. They have concerns about some of her relationships with U.S. adversaries. They want to know why she went to Syria to meet with the deposed dictator Bashar Assad in 2017. And so they say they are not willing to hold that hearing until they get all of her paperwork, her background checks, her ethics disclosures, and the like. And because this is the Intelligence Committee, Reed, it tends to operate a little differently than the rest of Congress. Congress is obviously famous for its gridlock, lots of acrimony, but because the Intelligence Committee, the Senate Intelligence Committee, deals with such sensitive information, government secrets and the like, they tend to collaborate pretty well. And so if all the Democrats are putting their foot down, saying they're not ready to go forward yet, it looks like the Republicans are going to respect that.
Fascinating. Okay, so another question for you. Inauguration Day just days away. Any details on upcoming events for the Trump-Vance team leading up to the big day?
Yep, we're starting to get some information about how the president-elect plans to spend the few days before he is inaugurated for a second time. And he's got a pretty full schedule. What we have learned is that he's going to hold a reception and fireworks show at his golf course in Sterling, Virginia on the Saturday before Inauguration Day. So that's this coming Saturday. So obviously he'll be leaving Palm Beach, where he is right now, and flying up to D.C. He's also going to lay a wreath at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier at Arlington National Cemetery on Sunday. And then this is a unique one as well, Reed. He is going to hold a victory rally at the Capital One Arena in the heart of Washington, D.C. on Sunday. Typically, presidents tend to see the inauguration itself as the big rally.
Right.
That's obviously the ultimate victory rally. All of your supporters show up on the National Mall to cheer for you. But this is a president who dearly loves a big rally, and so that's what he's going to get the day before he's sworn in.
Nancy, it's good to talk to you always, and it's nice to see it's balmy weather there in West Palm Beach. Please go get a cafecito for me, my friend. Thank you so much, and have a happy Monday. New images to our monitors show an inauguration rehearsal happening, preparations in full swing, like Nancy just talked about. But we're also seeing security measures. Matt McCool is a special agent in charge for the U.S. Secret Service. Here's what he had to say about making sure everybody stays safe. Listen.
All attendees will undergo screening. Designated checkpoints will be set up for members of the public interested in attending the inauguration. A map of the perimeter showing the locations of all checkpoints will be available online at www.inauguration.dc.gov. The website will also provide information about parking, road closures, and other impacts. The Federal Aviation Administration will announce temporary flight restrictions in and around Washington, D.C. The U.S. Coast Guard will communicate any maritime restrictions, which will also be linked to the inauguration website. Additional fencing and concrete barriers will supplement the fencing already around the Capitol for the election certification and President Carter's funeral. More than 30 miles of anti-scale fence will be used for the inauguration, more than any other NSSE ever before. The Secret Service's comprehensive security plan will continue to use drones as part of our protective posture. Do not be alarmed if you see these assets during the inauguration or in training in the days ahead.
Translation, security's tight. So the inauguration festivities, just to remind you, is set to kick off this Saturday with that presidential reception and the fireworks that Nancy Cordes just talked about. When we come back, President Biden gets set for his final foreign policy speech. This happens on the heels of a consequential conversation between President Joe Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. You're watching CBS News 24/7, streaming coast to coast and worldwide. We're watching these monitors for breaking news until we come back. Welcome back. Progress over the weekend in the fight against deadly Southern California wildfires. Yes, progress, but with the promised return of some pretty intense winds, will that progress be erased altogether? So the LA County Sheriff says 21 people are known to have lost their lives. And we understand as they go house to house, ruin to ruin really, the death toll is expected to rise. Those fires continue burning at this hour in the LA area. CAL FIRE tells us the Palisades fire near Malibu now at 37 square miles burned. Containment for that one, 14%. The Eaton fire near Pasadena now has burned 22 square miles. Containment there is at 33%. We're talking about entire neighborhoods incinerated. And at this hour, because of that, 92,000 people remain under evacuation orders. Going home to home at this point, if there are homes to go home to, is just not possible for many.
The conversation about repopulation is on all of our minds. I know that we are attending, staff's attending community meetings, whether they be out in the Palisades fire area in Malibu for us at LA County Sheriff's, in the Altadena area. We are hearing our community loud and clear, and we want to get you in there as soon as possible. But I want to reiterate what is holding us up. This is very important. We are still, for the Altadena area, we are in the third day of grid searching. It is a very grim task, and we, unfortunately, every day we're doing this, we're running across the remains of individual community members. That is not easy work, very sad to report, and I believe that work is not only going to continue, but I believe we'll continue to find remains. So please be patient with us. People are saying, I just want to go look at my house and I want to see what's left. We know that, but we have people literally looking for the remains of your neighbors.
So many of the relative few who can get in to go back to their neighborhoods are finding just literally the cement foundations of their homes are all that remain. That's the Calvin family. They really put a human face to the tragedy in the Eaton fire.
This is unreal. Oh my God. My house. Everyone's in the same boat. Like everybody you would depend on, everybody you would go to, they're all homeless also. They just lost everything. They've lost all the memories, all the joy, everything that we've built together in this neighborhood. We all lost together. And I hate it. I hate it because I love Altadena.
Zaire Calvin serves youth in his community as a high school football coach. 3 generations of his family call Altadena home. That is when it gets very real. You know, we can talk about the fire, you can show all the burned out cars and houses, but it's when the people go back to their homes that they just celebrated the holidays just days ago, really. That's when it really hits home, Jess.
And this is the time to really put them on that platform and allow for them to share their stories and to listen to them and listen to their needs. What do they need right now? Of course, there's the obvious, their homes are gone, but this is such an impactful event that's going to be felt for such a long time afterwards too. And you know, the other thing that we need to keep a close eye on, it has to do with the weather conditions, because recently, I mean, we were seeing wind gusts up to around 100 miles per hour just last week. Well, now we're forecasting 70 mile per hour winds into the coming days. We head over to the Eaton fire. We head all the way over into the Palisades fire. It's these areas that the firefighters and the boots on the ground are working so hard on containment, but with wind gusts forecasted anywhere up to around 40 miles per hour right now, and we're only going to see stronger winds into the overnight hours tonight, early morning hours tomorrow. That's the big concern for many of these community members down in Los Angeles and widespread throughout this region as the Santa Ana winds stay strong into the coming days. Now, the National Weather Service has issued a red flag warning. We advanced the clock all the way to Tuesday morning. We're still seeing similar conditions. That red flag warning goes until Wednesday, on top of a high wind warning that's been issued widespread throughout this region. I mean, taking a look at Tuesday evening all the way into our Wednesday forecast, those Santa Ana winds aren't letting up anytime soon, and it's dry condensed air that continues to push offshore. That's the big concern right now, because with low relative humidity, with dry conditions widespread throughout this area, and wind gusts that we've seen just within the past past 24 hours, anywhere up to around 60 to 70 miles per hour. We're really concerned for what's to come as we head into this week as we continue to fight these fires. Now, our fire weather outlook stretches from the border of Mexico all the way up into the Santa Clarita Mountains, but the Santa Clarita Mountains are under that extreme risk, meaning we're more concerned about this area for any potential spot fires as we head into the coming days as those winds continue to whip on. So we'll continue to keep a close eye on that, Reed.
All right. Thank you so much for that. So here's a question. How much warning did people in LA get to prepare for evacuations? We know days before the fire, the National Weather Service warned of those high winds. In fact, the day the fire broke out, Jess told our viewers nationally that the winds were kicking up. CBS News confirmed the timing of messages from officials. And CBS News national investigative correspondent Tom Hansen walks us through all of it.
The first fire weather watch warning came at 3:17 p.m. local time on Friday, January 3rd from the National Weather Service.
We've got warmer temperatures, dry conditions, and we do have a fire weather watch that has been issued.
By Sunday evening, it issued a red flag warning and posted this at 5 p.m., warning about extreme fire danger with widespread damaging winds. Monday morning, the governor's office informed the public it was deploying equipment and personnel to the LA area ahead of the extreme fire weather. The National Weather Service was warning about the wind that afternoon, telling people to prepare for gusts of up to 50 to 80 miles an hour. By Monday evening, the National Weather Service issued one of its most urgent alerts, a particularly dangerous situation, warning the public current conditions would cause fires to rapidly grow in size. An hour later, LA Mayor Karen Bass, who was out of the country, chimed in for the first time. She shared a National Weather Service alert 5 hours old about wind gusts. She did not point out fire danger. Her last comment, "Stay safe, LA." Tuesday morning, the firestorm started in Palisades. An alert at 11:13 told people there to get set for a potential evacuation. Less than an hour later, they were ordered to evacuate. Flames quickly engulfed the hills, but with limited ways out, traffic backed up. By Tuesday afternoon, trapped families started abandoning their cars, fleeing on foot. Bulldozers had to sweep away abandoned cars to make room for fire crews.
It's incredibly important that we heed the warnings, the calls.
Just before sundown Tuesday, California's governor met with firefighters on the front lines, declaring a state of emergency. Tuesday night, CAL FIRE said the Eaton fire started to the northeast. At 7:30, an ominous announcement to Santa Monica homeowners read, "This is a lawful order to leave now." By Tuesday night, more bad news. The Hearst fire sparked to the north, forcing people to flee in the dark. A long night for the tens of thousands of people who abandoned their homes and waited for what daylight would reveal. Tom Hansen, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Tom, thank you for that. Turning our monitors now to the White House. In just a few moments, President Joe Biden will deliver his final speech on foreign policy to the State Department with just 1 week until Donald Trump takes over at the White House. The speech comes as part of Biden's farewell to the nation after one term in office. He aimed to reestablish the U.S. as a global leader, went in saying he wanted to strengthen ties with international allies after President-elect Donald Trump and then President withdrew from several key treaties. Much of Mr. Biden's 4 years also dealt with the war between Israel and Hamas and the war in Ukraine. CBS News military analyst and retired U.S. Army Major Mike Lyons joins us now to break down this foreign policy under President Joe Biden. You know, both wars have defined the Biden administration, both still ongoing. So walk us through the situation with President-elect Trump and his administration. How do they stand to inherit both of those situations?
Yeah, it's a completely different world now that what Trump turned over to Biden as to what Biden is now turning back to Trump. And both of these conflicts are going in different directions. I think the one in Israel is going more towards a settlement. There is possibility of having some kind of ceasefire that takes place there. But we've seen in the past that Hamas has often backed out of those. And so whether or not that remains, whether that happens remains to be seen. Israel is going to continue to push that fight forward as they look to destroy their enemies there. However, the war in Ukraine is going to give the Trump administration a lot of opportunity early on to decide whether or not it's going to get involved or not, because that's going in the wrong direction from Ukraine's perspective. The United States will have to decide early on whether or not they want to add the kind of aid packages that the Biden administration has been doing, supplying Ukraine the aid that it needs. If it doesn't, if the U.S. doesn't do that, Ukraine likely loses that war in 12 to 18 months. I think that's a strategic catastrophe for the Trump administration, as Russia will eventually win that conflict.
Yeah, follow the money there. That will say a whole lot about what happens for the future of Ukraine. The president intends to tout his successful push to solidify NATO leaders in the last 4 years. Trump's role in that group is now quite uncertain. What do you foresee?
Well, Trump will bring that the transactional phase of his presidency, like he did last time, into NATO, where he's talking about increasing GDP spending for NATO countries to 5%. Biden can claim he's added 2 new countries to NATO, in Finland and Norway in the past, and Sweden in the past 2 years and during his administration. But I think that Donald Trump is clear when he says America first. I think our allies should be okay with that. They should think that that's not the worst thing in the world. If America's interests are aligned first with what we want to do, because then our allies' interests are aligned the same. So I don't think that the NATO countries, they'll be more prepared, I believe, for this new administration. And again, they'll have to decide as an alliance whether or not they're going to support Ukraine, because without that support, I think Russia takes over Ukraine very, very quickly.
Wow, much has happened, much could happen and will happen. Thank you so much for the conversation as we look live at those pictures just now of the podium where we expect President Biden to deliver that address. When we come back, we have some strong questions about the state of homeowners insurance and even renters insurance, not only in Southern California, but for the entire state of California and other states that are susceptible to disasters. We'll talk to Kelly O'Grady about that when we come back. You know, many homeowners in Southern California now face the very daunting task of rebuilding their homes without insurance coverage for their losses. You know, before the wildfires, we know this, insurers dropped coverage for thousands of Los Angeles homeowners. The numbers showed dropped policies is a growing trend with private insurers, with rising non-renewal rates in place, prone to climate disasters. So let's bring in CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady. Kelly, we keep hearing insurance companies are losing. Is it that they're losing, or is it that they're just not making as much money?
So, Reed, the answer is kind of both, right? So at the top line, you hear insurance companies, they're making record profits, more than we've ever seen in years before. But there's tons of different types of insurance. So when you drill down on the type of insurance as well as the state, that's where you start to see more differentiation. So let's take Southern California as an example in 2025. In homeowners, property and casualty insurance, that area you're likely going to see a loss versus maybe another state that didn't have this kind of mass disaster type of event. And if you look at State Farm in particular, so in 2023, they recorded net profits in their property and casualty insurance of $88 billion, but they also recorded an underwriting loss. So that means that all of the revenue that they came in, they actually recorded more loss than they did revenue, but they actually recorded record profits because what they were able to do is previous years where, you know, they actually made more money than they needed. They're able to take some of that money and then invest it and then cover those losses. So the answer to your question is kind of both, but right. The reason why these insurance companies are pulling out or not renewing is that when you have multiple years in a row in these particular types of states, that's when those losses incur year after year, and you don't sort of have that safety net from previous years.
Okay, so let's dig a little bit deeper into the insurance crisis, Kelly. It's not just happening in the state of California. Of course, California is commanding the headlines right now. But we are seeing climate disasters like wildfires, hurricanes, driving insurers across the U.S. to drop coverage for homeowners. So what's next for the insurance industry? Will it evolve?
So I think you're going to see a couple of things. You may see more insurance companies leave states. You know, it's in California, for example, and Florida. It's not just that people's policies weren't renewed. These companies decided to leave the state entirely because they were looking at this and the risk of disasters, and it wasn't a good business decision to take that risk and insure people. So you could see that being one sort of path forward. You're also going to see, Reed, insurance premiums go up for all of us, not just people in these disaster areas, which you will see those go up as well, because insurance companies, for the most part, in most states, are able to take those losses areas and then pass the costs on to the rest of us, even if we don't live in those types of areas. And then in general, you are starting to see a conversation happen where we may have a reckoning in this industry when it comes to legislation and regulation. But of course, that takes time. The more immediate result of this is that insurance premiums are going to go up, Reed.
Well, you speak to legislation. We know insurance companies have many lobbyists, both at the state and national level, where lawmakers are writing policy right now. They have a voice in the room. Kelly, let's switch gears just a little bit and talk about another big headline right now in the business world, especially the world of artificial intelligence. The Biden administration is proposing new restrictions on the export of AI chips. So what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so this sort of caps their big push when it comes to artificial intelligence to protect national security as well as to protect the U.S.'s standing as #1 when it comes to artificial intelligence innovation. So there is a new proposal on the table today. It won't take effect for a couple of months, so there is time for President-elect Trump, if he disagrees, to sort of come in with this and chart a different course. But for now, the chip exports banned when it comes to China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. Then there's a group of countries where chip exports are limited, and then there's the allies of the U.S. where it's just unlimited. But really, this is, from the tech industry standpoint, a big, big frustration because, of course, China is a huge, huge revenue generator when it comes to these AI chips. So a lot of tension right now when it comes to making money, but also protecting national security, Reed.
Kelly O'Grady, thank you so much. You always break it down to make these very big issues ways that we can understand them. We appreciate it so much, my friend. All right, when we come back, we have a group of neighbors lending a hand helping firefighters battle those wildfires in Los Angeles County. We will introduce you to somebody called the Heat Hawks. People doing good, neighbors helping neighbors. We love to see it. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Welcome back. Charged with negligent homicide, felony hit and run, and reckless operation of a vehicle after a deadly crash, former LSU football star Kyron Lacey is out of jail after posting a $151,000 bond last night. He spent less than 2 hours in custody. A 78-year-old man died, and 2 others left injured in that crash. Lacey, by the way, was expected to be picked in the NFL draft in April. 4 months after a deadly mass shooting at Appalachia High School, deputies arrested a 14-year-old for bringing a gun to that same school. In response, the school board there moving quickly, they put a new safety system in place to detect weapons brought onto campus. That community still reeling from the deaths of 4 in the September shooting. Students are going to learn from home today while staff learn about this new system. Well, a group of people living in Topanga Canyon are doing what they can to help firefighters and residents in the Los Angeles area. You're about to meet the Heat Hawks. They drive around Topanga Canyon looking for ways that they can just help their neighbors, just pull over and help. They say they've put out spot fires, they've turned off propane tanks. They feel like they've hopefully saved some homes. They say these small acts helping residents also was a part of being asked to do things like rescue pets and recovering important documents from their homes.
Tomorrow I will be running into the canyon for anything you guys need. The first request was literally, please go to my house, smash my back window, try to save my cats, please get the money out of there, please get my birth certificate, photos of my family, things like that.
Well, the Heat Hawks say they are leaving the more difficult firefighting tasks up to trained firefighters who they call the most incredible, valiant people they have ever met. See a need, meet a need. That is the best of the United States, our better angels. Thank you for watching CBS News 24/7. The news continues 24/7, and so do we.